Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, quite possibly one of the most dominant brands of the 1990s.
It took the world by storm from the day of the dumpster in 1993 that introduced the world to the first incarnation of Power Rangers of the Mighty Morphin era that was adapted from the Toei Super Sentai series Zyuranger, that featured 6 extraordinary individuals that would transform into a defense team of multicolored spandex and helmet apparel, drawing power from dinosaurs. Although, it should be noted that the only 2 dinosaurs in either Zyuranger or Power Rangers were the Triceratops and the Tyrannosaurus. Pterodactyl did exist during the Mesozoic era, but they were flying reptiles, not dinosaurs. And the saber-toothed tiger and the mastodon didn't exist until millions of years later in the Ice Age, long after the dinosaurs became extinct.
The original team comprised of Jason, Zach, Trini, Kimberly and Billy, and later Tommy joining as the legendary Green Ranger.
During Season 2, Austin St. John, Walter Jones, and the late Tweed Trang walked off the set as their characters Jason, Zach, and Trini. This was due to a pay dispute as they were only getting paid $500 an episode. Now, while I don't condone the unprofessional conduct of walking off the set like that without giving notice, I do appreciate their reasons for doing so. Because when you consider that it was the #1 show for kids and young families that was pulling in ratings and revenue through merchandise, you would think that Saban would be able to pay them a decent wage. But to my understanding, when Jason David Frank was asked to return to the franchise in 2004 for Dino Thunder as a favor to his friend Douglas Sloan, he said, and I quote, "Disney are like Saban. They're cheap."
Well, that's awkward.
So, with 3 of the original principal actors walking off the set, they were replaced by Rocky, Adam, and Aisha as the Red, Black, and Yellow Rangers, respectively, played by Stephen Cardonet, the Bosch, Johnny Young Bosch, and Karen Ashley, respectively. It was during the filming of the 3rd quarter of Season 2 that the cast would travel to Australia to film the movie whilst the series was still filming, of which the wedding and the return of the Green Ranger was filmed whilst they were on location as the movie was going over time.
So it's fair to presume that the movie would have featured the original Red, Black, and Yellow Rangers had they not walked off the set.
But it is what it is. Steve, Johnny, and Karen would join David Yost, Jason David Frank, and the irreplaceable Amy Jo Johnson as Power Rangers would get their first movie after only 2 years as a series.
And so, for the silver anniversary, and I've always wanted to say this, it's Morphin time.
If you're expecting groundbreaking and thespian-styled Oscar-worthy scripting from a Power Rangers story, then this ain't your movie.
Power Rangers at its core is a good, goofy comedy action romp that is in on the joke. It knows it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's having fun with it, and it just wants the viewer to enjoy it.
What the movie does well is taking the formula from the series and allow it to feel like an expanded episode of the show, but much larger in scope with regards to pacing, plot development, production value, and allowing time for the audience to breathe so that they can absorb the story. The movie starts with a charity skydive to help fund the Angel Grove Observatory with an approaching comet. A new evil is unearthed that represents a threat to life on Earth. The Rangers try to tackle it and have to acquire a new approach. Return to Earth, bring out the Zords, and destroy the monster with the status quo resumed. Now that's the episode format, but with 3 times the runtime.
I do like the message of what you're able to achieve when you only have your wits about you, and why you shouldn't take what you have for granted, which Billy highlights about Morphin.
You know the funny thing about Morphin? What's that? You don't appreciate it because you can't do it anymore!
It's a philosophical lesson that has been seen throughout life and fiction, of which was also seen in the Sonic Underground episode When in Rome, where the Oracle states, "You did this without your powers. Think what you can accomplish with them."
As much as I enjoyed the series back in the day, my biggest chief complaint was that they came across as too wholesome. Now, I'm not saying for one second that I'm advocating for them to be the complete polar opposite. That's not what I'm getting at. I would have preferred to have seen a balance whereby they're still decent at their core, but they're just a little more easygoing.
I think this is what the 2017 iteration had a better grasp on, but I feel like those incarnations of the characters would have benefited by having less attitude. Crying out loud, they made Sonic the Hedgehog look modest by comparison, and he's supposed to be the hedgehog with attitude.
In spite of that tangent, the writing allows for a much larger scaled version of the series with a lot more at scope and a much darker tone than that of the show, which I think this movie actually benefits from that. The principal cast from the series reprise their roles and they're on form. Karen Ashley is as pleasant as ever as Aisha, and David Yost is as competent and astute as Billy. I felt Johnny Young Bosch was underplayed as Adam, but then again, you have to remember that he wasn't exactly known for being too vocal in the series, and the same can be said for Stephen Cardenet as Rocky. Although Adam does get in two decent gems in the movie, such as...
I'm a frog.
when he learns that he's a frog, and...
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
when the group are walking through a forest, going past what can only be the planet's equivalent of dinosaur fossils. The ones who got the most dialogue were David, Jason David Frank as Tommy Oliver, and Amy Jo Johnson as Kimberly Hart.
English actor Paul Freeman served as the movie's main antagonist, Ivan Ooze, a morphological being that had been sealed away for 6,000 years by a group of warriors similar to the Power Rangers, stopping Ooze from ruling the world with an unparalleled terror.
What Freeman brings to the role as Ivan is a lot of wit, ham, and surprisingly a likeable villain that just oozed charisma when playing off of Lord Zed and Rita.
The Black Plague! The Spanish Inquisition!
Well, I don't think anybody was expecting that.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
You're right.
The late Robert Axelrod reprises his vocal role as Lord Zed, and he sounds more intimidating than what he usually did for the show. I put that down to the sound editing and that the movie had more of a budget to play with when compared to the series. He gives a good performance despite the limited screen time the character has. Barbara Goodson reprises her vocal role as Rita, and like Axelrod, she makes use of what screen time she has. Paul Scryer and Jason Narvey reprise their roles as comical school bullies in Bulk and Skull, and they add for the comedy relief when the Rangers are doing their charity contributions in the skydive, and they land in a construction site, in typical comedic fashion.
Landing zone? Huh, where's the free food?
You idiot! All your kicking and screaming threw off the Stealth Eagle's sense of direction.
Stealth Eagle? Huh, Lame duck is more like it.
Jamie Croft as Fred Kelman was used as the child audience participation in the movie as a metaphor that even someone that young can have the intuition and self-motivation to help make a difference. But I'll be frank here. I thought his story slowed the pacing down and just served as padding when the story broke away from the Rangers' quest to obtain the great power on Thanos. Gabrielle Fitzpatrick as Dulcea I found to be very endearing and charming as this warrior that had stood watch over the great power. It's rumoured that Catherine Sutherland had auditioned for the role of Dulcea at the time, but was turned down by the producers for being too young.
If her costume was being done today, it wouldn't be anywhere near as revealing as in this movie. But I go by the notion that this design was done to show her power and athleticism. And let's be fair, Gabrielle must have trained vigorously to get into that amazing shape. Oh, good lord.
I have mixed sentiments with regards to the effects of this movie. First off, I'll be fair. I thought the suits were a vast improvement over the spandex costumes on the series where they actually looked like they could take a pounding. It probably wasn't that comfortable for the cast, and even less so for the stunt actors who had to bear the brunt of the stunts, considering the weight of the suits was said to weigh up to 90 pounds from what I remember reading around the time of release. Some of the editing is atrocious. One example that comes to mind is Tommy summoning his sentient saber, Saba. Rather than have a post-production edit where they could paint his sword in, what transpires is probably the worst looking jump cut since Bill Murray's tablecloth in 1984's Ghostbusters. Although that by comparison looks good compared to this. And let's talk about the CG Zords, shall we? In a word, they looked cheap. But, since the budget was $15 million, you're not going to get stellar visual effects at that cost. Now, I know some people will say that it's a product of its time, which they're right in that regard. But then I point to 1993's Jurassic Park where the CG dinosaurs still look visually convincing to this day. Let me put it to you this way. The CG for the Zords would have been decent for a good budget PS2 game.
Well, I guess it's true what they say. You only get what you pay for. Now, I cannot fault the score for this picture, especially the majestic theme that is used when the Rangers receive their animal spirits of the Ninjetti, as this conveys the sense of magic and awe.
Graham Revell composed the score for the motion picture, and I find his work here is on the level of Sir John Williams and Alan Silvestri, of which I consider the masters of the composing world.
The moving and somber score does give a lot of emotional weight when the Rangers return to the command center and seeing Zordon lying lifeless, realizing that they got back too late.
The Power Rangers theme is remixed for the movie, and it's a much more rock and roll vibe when compared to the TV series version that was composed and sung by Ron Wasserman. I may have misgivings about this flick, but the movie does this theme justice. This movie theme would be reused in Power Rangers 2017 as the Rangers take their Dinozords to the battlefield.
The use of Van Halen's Dreams was a nice way to end the picture, with everyone safe and sound and Angel Grove thanking the Power Rangers, made for a real feel-good moment. It's a guilty pleasure. Not perfect by any stretch, and I don't think it was ever meant to be. It's just a campy movie that kids and young families that were fans of the franchise could appreciate because it had a little something for everyone.
It only took $66.4 million against a budget of $15 million, but considering that it was up against Batman Forever at that time, well, need I go on? Elements of the movie would be carried over into the Season 3 four-parter Ninja Quest, where the Rangers still lose their powers and have to travel to the Desert of Despair where they meet Ninjor. A character, while harmless enough, was less credible than Dulcia, and goofy to boot. But that's my take. A second Power Rangers movie would follow with a limited theatrical release in Turbo, a Power Rangers movie in 1997 that tied directly into the TV series that would then continue with the 5th season of the series, Power Rangers Turbo. There wouldn't be another Power Rangers movie for 20 years until the movie franchise rebooted with Power Rangers 2017 with a much more grounded and gritty version of the Rangers headlined by Dacker Montgomery, R.J. Kyler, Naomi Scott, Ludi Lin, and Becky G.
The movie's not perfect, but in some sense that gives it character and personality, and it reminds you of a time when things were just that little bit more innocent. And I think there's something to be said for that. I'm MJ Knight, and we went back to action for Power Rangers. Power Rangers at its core is a good, goofy comedy action romp that's in on the joke. The movie knows exactly what it is, and it wants to be... It's Morphin... I've never heard of Morphin... Maybe Kaiju could tell me that. Kaiju, is there a form of Super Sentai that goes, it's Morphin... I don't know. I seem to be channeling my inner Leonard Nimoy. MJ, is this even logical? he's looking at the guy going, okay, I sound nothing like that. B. Rain goes, yes you do. 2 bloopers. So, if Kaiju's Spock, presumably that would make Raiden, Geordie LaForge, Lids would be Counselor Troy. Win would be Dr. Beverly Crusher, so what would that make Oni? If you say Picard, I'll kill you. Yeah, but you get to be Picard, the best captain of them all. That is true. Counselor Troy? Man the warp drive. As much as I enjoyed the series back in the day, my biggest chief complaint was that they came across as too wholesome. Now, I'm not for well, that was a Morphin failure. Do I get the Megazord to help me out? No, you do not get the Megazord to help you out. You have to sort it out. Ah, damn it. Not even Dragonzord? No. Damn it. Her costume, if it was being done today, probably wouldn't have been as revealing. But I go by the notion that they designed her costume back then to show her power and athleticism. And Gabrielle must have chained? I've heard of weight training, but weight chaining? Is this gonna, go into, swimming chaining, football chaining, basketball chaining? Where am I gonna break the chain with this, guys? And I can hear you all groan. It's like, oh, boo, you suck.